Okay. Claire wants to join the show. Do you want to have a conversation with Claire?
I do.
Okay, so the two of you will have now a nice conversation. I will let her in.
Hi guys.
Hey, Claire.
I I I wanted to answer your questions earlier, but and hi Yoav, um, about the world reserve currency, and I don't think you understand that everybody is forced to buy their oil in dollars. Do you know that, Kirk?
Yes, I've heard of that.
So that's why it's so important, and America is the only country in the whole wide world that has this privilege and is anxious to maintain it because it makes borrowing much easier, um, for it than other countries. Which
Okay. And so is what's your point?
So my point is that it funds its imperialism and its imperial wars, which you may or may not agree with, depending on whether you have shares in BlackRock.
I think if I think if America actually committed to the wars it started, I would support them.
Which wars do you want America to commit to?
I think America should commit to supporting Ukraine. I don't
Why?
necessarily know enough about it, but
But
I'd have
you
to look
still
more.
go war, war, war. It's a war. I support it. I don't know anything about it, but I want to
I was
support
referring
it.
to another war. I was saying I don't know enough about it, but
Yeah,
I
but
think
but but you still want to
there's
support
an
it, which is
argument to
pretty
be
dumb,
made.
isn't it?
But there's an argument to be made that if had America committed to the Iraq War, we could it could have been successful. Now the problem is America didn't commit to the Iraq War in a way that was successful. So I don't necessarily know if it could have been successful, but if it could have been successful, I think there's an argument to be had that that was justified.
Well, you know what happened. You don't need me to tell you what happened, but you're just saying, let's go to war, right? Even if we don't know that much about it, even though we know it has failed, but let's just go to war because we're Americans. Rah rah rah.
Well, let's not strawman here. Let's try and
No,
use
I'm not
principle of clarity.
strawmanning. It came out of your own.
I was
Look, I
saying
know you're
I
just
don't know
some
enough
dumb
about it.
kid, right? You like the idea of war. It's fun. You watch movies. People die, but it's not you.
I
And
don't
go, well,
necessarily
carry on asking
support
your
it
dumb
in the
questions.
sense that I think it's a good thing, but
You
if it's
obviously do
successful,
because you said we didn't do it hard enough. We
well,
didn't expend enough blood and treasure, and but if we did, we would have won, and it would be great.
I said that's a possibility, but I only support it tentatively, knowing it only
But
as a
you still support it
possibility.
now. You're
No, I
saying we
don't. I
could
don't
have
necessarily
won,
support
but
it.
you
I don't
didn't,
necessarily support
and
having
you want
troops
to
in
do
Iraq
some
now.
more.
I'd have to look more into it to see whether I support it. But I'm just saying it's a possibility I've considered.
Well, just carry on. I mean, just go to the casino and
But
spend all
Claire,
your blood and treasure on these imperial wars that will, in the end, destroy you. I mean, I think you should be comforted that most people in power think like you and rely on the mindset of people like you.
you also have to understand that when it comes to certain wars, whilst you can argue certain wars are imperial by the United States,
Of course
um,
they are.
would you say that supporting certain countries like Taiwan or Ukraine who are defending themselves, more imperialistic
Oh,
countries like Russia
really?
and China,
Okay. Yeah,
is
you
that
obviously
imperialism?
believe in all the propaganda. But then you're dumb, right? You're just some dumb kid in some community college asking lots of dumb questions and thinking you're still going to win if you push hard enough.
Do you think? Well, that's not really the point of my question. The point is it imperialistic for if you whether or not you think it's successful is another question. You think it's imperialistic
Of course,
to
it's
support?
imperialism. What do you?
Well,
I'm going
well
to
then,
leave now.
yeah.
I just don't. I'm dumbfounded at the kind of questions that you're asking.
Because to
You
me,
don't even know it's an imperial war? You
well,
think you believe
Russia
in
is
all
the
this
one. You're right. It
propaganda
is an
about it
imperial
being
war
a
from
liberal
Russia's perspective.
intervention? We're just going there to give more feminism and more human rights and free these people. You actually believe in all that?
Well, I don't necessarily know about the feminism thing, but I think it's good to support human rights, and I think Russia is violating human rights by invading Ukraine and killing innocent Ukrainians, and so I would say we should commit ourselves to defending Ukraine.
Do you ever think to listen to some other media outlet than the ones you're allowed to listen to?
I've listened to some Democracy Now, and I've listened to some of the Young Turks, but I don't find their news compelling.
I'm sure you've never heard of RT
I've heard of
or the
RT, and I've listened
Duran.
to some RT.
Well, that's something.
So, how is it imperialistic to support a country which is being invaded by another country?
You don't know that Ukraine used to be part of Russia?
I,
But then why would you? You just go to community college and you don't know
I've
much
heard that
history.
during the Soviet Union, parts of modern day Ukraine were part of the boundaries of the Soviet Union, but modern day Ukraine is not related to that.
Oh, they don't speak Russian. Their culture isn't Russian. It wasn't full of Russians.
What do you mean full of
I
Russians?
mean,
It wasn't full
what
of Russian
country
citizens.
was Britain fighting against when in the Crimean War? Was it a country called Ukraine or a country called Russia?
The Crimean War. I'm trying to think. When was that again?
1854.
1854.
It's
Well,
either 1854, 1834. I forget now. But the point is, at the time, it was called Russia. It was obviously an imperial war because all the great powers were there. The Italians, the French. It was all about carving up the Ottoman Empire, which was the weak man of Europe, and getting a bit, a slice of the Middle East, which at the time the Ottomans controlled. And Israel was one of them, one of the more important territories, because obviously the Holy Land would be significant to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. And as we can see, if you're a powerful Islamic empire, you would like to administer the Holy Land. And if you're a powerful Christian empire, you would like to administer the Holy Land.
yeah. So what happened in 1853 or 1833, or 1854, 1834? What does any of that have to do with whether or not modern day Ukraine being invaded by modern day Russia is justified or imperialistic?
Geopolitics, if you've
What
heard the
about
expression.
geopolitics?
Well, empires are interested in geopolitics. They want control of, sea lanes and territories in order to advance their imperial interests, or just to prevent a rival empire from getting it. It's a bit like monopoly.
Um, uh, Jan God, I'm not an Israeli, so I don't know what that question point is. Um, yeah. s- So are you saying that because at one point Ukraine was part of Russia, this means that now Russia is not imperialistic by invading Ukraine, even though they separated previously?
You might have heard of the expression buffer states and, areas of influence. You might even have heard of the Monroe Doctrine.
I've
Have you
heard
heard
of
of the
it.
Monroe Doctrine?
Yes.
So it's basically Americans telling the Europeans to keep out of America's backyard, which is basically Central and South America. And if they didn't, they'd be kicked out, as they were in the 1898 Spanish-American War.
Okay, and so what does that have to do with what's going on in Ukraine?
We're talking about areas of influence. So basically, the Russians were saying, it does appear that all these countries that used to be buffer states, for example, the Eastern Bloc that narrowed down to the Warsaw Pact, have all gone NATO, and we're feeling a bit encircled. And Ukraine isn't yet NATO, so could we not have Ukraine become NATO? Please?
Well, Ukraine's a sovereign country, so they have the right
Oh,
to
well,
join the NATO.
okay, sovereign country. There are no sovereign countries in Europe. Canada is not a sovereign country. Australia is. America is a global hegemon. There are no sovereign countries really, apart from the countries America likes to demonize, such as Russia and such as China, who do not operate under representative democracy. I mean, Russia actually is a liberal democracy. They even have a liberal party. They have elections, but because Putin won't do everything the neocons want, he is considered in the way of American imperialism.
Yeah, no, that I just no. I mean, the fact of the matter is that, like, you can say America's a global hegemon, but that doesn't change the fact that a country which you may argue was geopolitically influenced by Western culture or Western geopolitics, was invaded by another country. And that's like saying, well, if Canada decided that they're going to put a military base in Mexico, that America has a right to invade Mexico as a result of that. That's literally the logic you're utilizing.
Well, okay, since you're talking about Canada and Mexico, I mean, I invite you to consider how Americans would feel if Canada went communist and Mexico went Muslim. I don't think Americans would be able to sleep at night. They'd feel surrounded.
So do you think it would be justified? I mean, first of all,
You'd
there's
probably
also the
do
question of human
something,
rights.
to Muslim Mexico or communist Canada. I'm sure you would.
Well, there's also the question of human rights. So I don't think I would support this. I don't know if I would support invading them if they had a different geopolitical structure, but if they were violating human rights of Americans, so they were invading us, we would have the right to defend ourselves in the same way that because Russia was invading Ukraine, Ukraine has the right to defend itself from Russia. Right? I mean,
Well,
unless
there was a reason why Russia invaded Ukraine, and you can see that Ukraine is being treated as if it were a member of NATO, right? This is the reality of what has happened, no matter, how they use words to disguise, the situation. Ukraine is being treated as if it were already a member of NATO. And this, I guess, the rest of the world can see if they're being, reasonably objective. But this has been, what American imperialism is, how it operates. I mean, I guess it started with the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and then it stopped for a bit. There were skirmishes in Africa, I suppose, to, get control of the precious resources there, gold and that sort of thing. But yeah, the more obvious invasions have taken place this century. The oil-rich Muslim countries. I suppose it's quite clever. You bomb the crap out of these Muslim oil-rich countries, and then you ship the people in those countries back to your country as cheap labor. And when some of them go a bit crazy and blow themselves up, you can demonize Islam.
yeah, well, that's not. I mean, what's going on with Muslim countries is not necessarily the same as what's going on with the Russia Ukraine, but still, I just don't think it's ever justified. And let me ask you this: would you say the same is true for Taiwan? Would you say if China invades Taiwan, they would be justified because Taiwan eventually was at one point owned by communist China, or under the rule of China.
Well, Taiwan actually belongs to China. I mean, it's Chinese.
According to the Chinese, but not according
Well,
to
of
anyone
course.
else.
I mean, the Taiwanese are, well, Taiwan is considered a rogue province. And why would any American risk his or sacrifice his life over Taiwan? It's not his business. It's obviously an imperial war. And sadly, there appears to be preparations being made to start this war. I think it's something to do with, let's start a war with Russia, and then we'll maybe start a war with China, and blow the whole world up, so nobody gets to inherit the world after the Americans are through with it, because they're gonna blow it all up.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to let human rights abusing regimes invade other countries without consequence.
So you think you have the right to be the policeman of the world, but it's not appreciated. I mean, you think you have this moral right, and you think you're the good guys, but that's not what the rest of the world thinks. They think you're a bully boy, a gangster, and a bit mad, and you probably will start World War III and blow everything up just so nobody else can inherit the earth after you've been through with it.
I think Ukrainians appreciate being supported by the West, and I think most Western Europeans do as well.
Well, because they're stupid, right? The Europeans are just being run by warmongering women. There's Kaya Kallas and Ursula von der Leyen. I don't know why they're encouraging all this war, because actually the EU is only meant to be an economic zone, but obviously it's very useful for the Americans to control Europe financially as well as militarily through NATO. So basically, the Europeans are just a bunch of very stupid people who are paying for the war in Ukraine. They're paying for a war in Europe that will blow up in their faces and maybe end them up being nuked by Russia.
I don't think
when
Russia's
Russia
stupid.
finally loses its patience.
I don't think Russia's stupid enough to do that. Like, Russia's not stupid enough to nuke Europe, because if Russia nukes Europe, then Russia's going to be nuked. Like, that's a stupid prediction. Like, I'm not gonna say you're stupid, but that's a stupid prediction. Like, objectively, like, the fact of the matter is, you can say Ukraine doesn't have a chance of winning the war. I would disagree with that, but that's an arguable
Well,
position.
the Ukrainians have lost the war. You haven't noticed.
How have Ukrainians lost the war?
They haven't won it, have they? Well, we can look up the details and all the names of these Russian-sounding names, but you can get it from other sources about how the war is going for the Ukrainians. I mean, the poor Ukrainians. I mean, all their women have left Ukraine. Most of the men are dead, and they were just dumb. The Europeans are, have a hole in their heads.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Claire, I think that's really a really bleak prediction. I mean, it's possible that with enough foreign aid from Western countries that Ukraine will be able to maintain its sovereignty, but we'll see. But putting that aside, I'm also curious why you harp on this idea that they're led by warmongering women. Like that, what does their gender have to do with this?
You haven't noticed that Kaya Kallas and Ursula von der Leyen have been very strong on continuing the war with Ukraine?
Yeah, but you could just say warmongering leaders. Why do you have to specify that they were women?
Well, because they are women, and obviously they have no business being where they are. And men
I'm
are
saying the
just
fact that woman
dumb
is
for,
irrelevant.
dying for the wars of these warmongering women.
But you could just say warmongering leaders. Why do you have to harp on the fact that they're women? Like, why does it matter?
Well, because I'm saying that these women do not have much responsibility for their actions. And the men are dumb for letting them dictate foreign policy. Where are the men? I think they've
So
become women.
do you not think that women should be allowed to be in positions of leadership?
Not really, because people
Oh,
will wonder where the hell the men are and what they're doing. That they must have a hole in their head to let women declare war.
I mean, I think that's a little bit sexist, to be honest. But like,
I don't care what you think about it. I mean, obviously there are, gender differences, and you're clearly some kind of feminist, right? Because that's how you've been indoctrinated. I'm not a feminist.
well, I don't support certain things that feminists support, like abortion rights, but I support other things like feminists support. Like, I don't think that women should be second-class citizens, and I believe in I don't believe gay or trans people should be thrown off buildings, or some such nonsense.
I don't believe in any of that. I don't think there are any books saying gay men should be thrown off tall buildings. Oh yes, the Talmud says that.
Uh, I don't know the Talmud enough to have someone have a little bit of intellectual humility here and say I don't know, but I've never heard an Orthodox Jew ever say that. So, like, yeah, unless you
This
have a
was
source
something
on
I
that.
read in a Jewish chronicle, that instead of pelting the sodomite with stones, it was just easier to throw him off a tall building, probably because most people were reluctant to stone the sodomite to death, because they probably thought, well, what's he done? That deserves such a terrible sentence. And I guess the rabbis must have said, but we still have to carry it out. Let's just push him onto a pile of stones from a tall building and count the job done.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard that, so maybe I'll have to look more into it. But either way, I don't think you need to be a feminist to think that it's okay for women to be leaders as long as they're competent. Now, as for the question of whether they are competent, this just goes into your fundamental moral axiom of whether you think it's okay to invade another country because it was at one point another your own country, and because you think, oh well, what if they join NATO? And I just think that's not okay. It's just, to me, an axiomatic right of all countries to be sovereign in their own territory without having
There
another
are
country
no
invade
sovereign
them.
countries with the American. I mean, South America is the backyard of America. Trump is just saying, I want, the oil of Venezuela. Basically all the South American countries are US vassal states, including Europe, including Australia, including Canada. And I guess Trump is just going to pay some derisory sum for Greenland, to the Danes, and they won't be able to say anything. They'll just have to meekly take whatever derisory payment Trump decides to give them, because they have no military, right? I mean, the Europeans are weak and stupid and are run by women.
Yeah, you seem to have a pretty bleak view of human relations. I try to think that things are more than just a power play, right? I try to see the good in people, right? That's a fundamental axiom I have, that people are made in the image of God, and because of that, I believe unless you have evidence to the contrary, you should assume people are innocent until proven guilty.
Well, this idea of either God has an image or he doesn't. So I really don't understand this repeated reference to man being made in the image of God, when Jews and Muslims would say God is ineffable and has no image. So that's very confusing, and I'm sure it is fundamentally nonsensical. if we're going to, be obeying God, then we have to refer to scripture and take all the words seriously, including idolatry. Because, basically, if you're an idolater, it just means that you make up the rules as you go along. You follow no scripture. And you give your ruling classes, who are corrupt and incompetent, the right to make up the rules as they go along, to your detriment, because they'll probably be waging ruinous and reckless imperial wars and getting you to pay taxes and maybe conscripting you to die in them. And this has been history.
Yeah.
For a long, well, perhaps it will never change.
I mean, I don't. When we're saying in the image of God, I don't think we mean the literal image. In fact, I know we don't mean like a literal physical image, if that's what you mean. But
It's a metaphor for something or other, but it just sounds grandiose and mystical and beautiful, but fundamentally it means nothing. And there are so many things that people keep referring to that are fundamentally meaningless, but sounds nice. It's a hocus pocus and mumbo jumbo of religion, and people do love it. They love it because they don't understand it.
Well, that's interesting because I thought you were an advocate for religion.
Well, I'm an advocate for rules, right? And if you want a proper religion, you have to have religious principles. And sadly, Christianity is completely bereft of any principle. So if you ask a Christian what Christian principles are, you won't get the same answer from Christians, because it's uncodified. They might even say the Ten Commandments, and then you say, what about idolatry? And they'll, not want to discuss it. But the fact is, idolatry is not not really following the rules and not referring to scripture for guidance.
But
And not taking idolatry seriously.
But hasn't Hezi already explained to you that from our understanding, at least we as Noahides and Orthodox Jews have, that Christianity is not idolatry, but it is shituf, right? So it's joint worship.
Hezi wants to be nice to everyone, but at some point you have to draw the line.
Okay.
It seems to me to be the equivalent of, I won't drink poison, but you can, because it's you, and I don't care about you. You drink your poison, but I'll refrain.
Yeah, I don't think that you as a agnostic in England has a lot of value to add to a conversation about what Noahides and Orthodox Jews believe, because if your position seems to be that we as Noahides and Orthodox Jews should be condemning Christians, and that's like, well, you can do that from your perspective, but don't, like, it's not nice to tell other people what they should believe.
Unless it actually has an impact on your society. I mean, what if the people around you believe that it is okay to kill babies for fun? Well, what then?
Well, yeah, I mean, you should try and stop those beliefs.
Yeah. So as regards idolatry, when you're talking about idolaters, they literally make up the rules as they go along. And because they don't take seriously idolatry as, a mortal sin, they'll carry on doing it because they don't really believe that God exists to punish them for anything. So, even when they pay lip service to laws forbidding murder, theft, etc., they'll think, well, if I can get away with it, I'll do it. That is fundamentally what an atheist thinks, because he doesn't really believe God exists to punish him for anything. And he could, in theory, get away with murder. And that is what motivates people like that. And Christians, I'm afraid, that you know how confused they are.
Well,
They,
I
they
don't
can't
believe in the
take anything
Trinity.
seriously because they don't believe in anything. They are fundamentally without any convictions. There might be a day when they feel that they believe in God, and the next day they might doubt it, and the day after they will deny the existence of God. It's just their mood. They literally have no convictions,
But
and
I'm not.
are in fact encouraged not to because it makes them more malleable to their government, who of course wants to manipulate their behavior and yes, tell them what to believe.
But so long as they believe basically in one God, even if they worship God jointly with the Jesus, um, it's not my position to tell them how they can relate to their creator. As long as, like I said, they're not actually committing idolatry and worshiping Jesus in the way that an idolater would. But I don't think most Christians I understand the Trinity to such a degree that they are actually performing idolatry. Most
Well,
Christians don't understand the Trinity.
of course, they wouldn't acknowledge that, and as Christians, they wouldn't be, talking to Jews or Muslims much. But the point of the government wanting them to be malleable is because then these governments can send them to war or agree to transing their kids and whatever evil their governments want them to do. They don't. They actually want them to be stupid. That is fundamentally the problem. So with Jews and Muslims, they can say, oh, but our Quran, our Torah doesn't say this thing. So at least they have something to hold on to. But what does the New Testament even say? It says nothing. Clearly, we don't even know the position that Jesus really took on the adulteress. Are we to forgive her as Jesus did, or stone her to death? We don't know, and we're not meant to know. We're just meant to obey the law of the land made by our corrupt and incompetent leaders. And if we get upset, we're told to pray to Jesus. And this traditionally has been what Christians were supposed to do until they started rejecting the whole thing.
Well, I believe most Christians believe in following something like a natural law tradition. I can't speak for Christians because I'm not a Christian, but what I can say is that in my experience, most Christians believe that um, certain things that we would consider part of the Noahide laws can either be derived from natural law or from something like the Ten Commandments, right? And if they believe in something similar to the Ten Commandments, then they're not perfect. That's not perfect, right? Because there's certain Ten Commandments that don't necessarily apply to Noahides, but many of there's a lot of overlap between the Noahide laws and the Ten Commandments. And so, to the extent that Christians believe in the Ten Commandments, um, it can be a positive thing because it can encourage following of the Noahide laws, right? I mean, no sexual immorality, no adultery. I believe is one of the Ten Commandments, right?
Yes, yes. So there was a time when Christians took marriage seriously, right? And then feminism happened, and then they started going on the pill and having abortions, etc. And then there was a lowering of the birth rate and a labor shortage and mass immigration, and everything's changed out of all recognition. But obviously marriage is crucial in keeping your society stable. And now no one really wants to marry because no one wants the onerous responsibilities of married parenthood, and they I think it is a problem because if you're going to be an aging and shrinking society, then you will continue to have the problem of mass uncontrolled immigration and the bitterness and anger that you will feel towards the immigrants themselves, and Muslims whom you feel threatened by, and Jews that these Christians will invariably blame when things get bad. So I think it's bad for all concerned. And if only people would just focus on the rules and what what important words mean, like idolatry, instead of saying, oh, but it's okay for Christians to practice Christianity, which is a complete cop-out, isn't it? I
Yeah,
mean, you can tell that the
I
Jews
think it's
thought,
more
well, we
nuanced.
don't want to be too rude about Christians, because we if we are rude, then they'll kick them out. They'll kick us out of their Christian kingdom, and we'll have to be the wandering Jew again. And we're quite comfortable now, and if we can tell a few lies and not say a few important things, then we should be okay. We don't want to move again. We certainly don't want to go to Israel, which is full of malarial swamps, as they were until fairly recently.
Yeah, I think it's more nuanced than that. I think the main reason, I mean, I haven't looked too deep into this, to the studies. I haven't studied too deeply the issue, but to my understanding, the reason that the Trinity for Noahide is not considered idolatry but joint worship is because of the idea that Christians don't see Jesus as equal to, or in practice, they don't see Jesus as equivalent to, just God. They worship God the Father, and then my understanding is from the monarchical Trinity, which is Eastern Orthodox, and to my understanding, many Catholics believe in it as well. But I could be mistaken. Is that it proceeds from God the Father, which seems to be a better understanding of the, or more kosher understanding of the Trinity. But
Yes,
like I said, I haven't looked into this too deeply to know. But it's a
well,
lot
it's
more
more
nuanced
logical,
than
right?
that.
Understand.
It's more
Well,
logical,
yes, the
right?
monarchical Christian, yeah, the monarchical Trinity, clearly makes sense in that, you would expect God to be more powerful and higher status than the Son. But the egalitarian Trinity must surely have been conceived of in order to anticipate how the Jews would argue, which is that the God of Israel will always be more powerful than the crucified Christ of the Christians. And that was the reason why the Christian theologians insisted that Jesus had to be co-equal, co-eternal, and co-substantial with God. So it was based on a lie in order to win a theological argument against the Jews. And
Yeah, I'd
I think
have
that
to.
that's the only way to understand the Trinity. And but then we know what happened with people who tried to deny it. They were burnt at the stake, and then the founding fathers thought, well, we don't want any of this in our republic. And because of the founding of the American Republic and their First Amendment, of course, the rest of Europe were going to want those rights too when they realized the Americans enjoyed their freedom of belief.
Yeah,
And that was what, ended belief in the Trinity, really.
I'd have to look more into it. I don't know whether or not other versions of the Trinity are ever considered idolatry, but from the Orthodox Jews that I've spoken to, they all seem to basically agree that at least most Christians are not idolaters. I don't know if there's any version of the Trinity which is idolatry. I'm sure there possibly is, but I'd have to look more into it. But yeah, that's just from my experience. The Orthodox Jewish community does seem to, in general, say that most Christians are not idolaters, and that their understanding of the Trinity is not idolatry for them. Right now, there's something in the
Well, they
joint
won't be
worship.
saying it to your face, as a Gentile, right? Because then you might get angry with them, or something, and the Christians can get very violent and unpleasant. Historically, when Jews win a theological argument, I mean they're always in a difficult position. If they lose the argument, they look foolish amongst other Jews. If they win the argument, they might get their Talmud burnt, or even get themselves burnt at the stake in an inquisition. So I suppose historically they've always, spoken out of both sides of their mouths, and understandably so. But I think we need to be honest about the whole thing. I mean, how can you deny that worshipping a man is not idolatry when we see idols of Jesus and Mary all over the place? Maybe we don't want to admit it, but we could be a bit more honest about it. I know a lot of people are invested in the whole Christianity thing. I do have relations who are Christian, and people who have converted to yet another wrong religion are even less reluctant to, sorry, even more reluctant to admit that they converted to the wrong religion. But surely the point is that if we're going to be worshipping the most powerful God conceivable, who was supposed to have forbidden idolatry, then I think we should consider the problem of idolatry.
So
You understand opportunity cost, don't you?
Yeah, I understand the concept of opportunity cost in economics.
Yeah. So you can understand that if you're an idolater, you pay the opportunity cost of not being rightly guided by God's laws.
Yeah, but that just assumes Christianity is idolatry, which I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree on, because I think this argument is pointless, because I don't think you're going to change your mind. No matter how much rabbinic evidence I give you, I don't think you're going to change your mind that Christianity is idolatry, so I don't see the point in arguing that. But what I will
Well, it's a
say
two
is,
Jews, three opinions problem, right? You'll never get them to
but
agree because Jews don't have a pope or a supreme rabbi. So you'll always find one Jew saying one thing and another saying another, and you'll never get them to agree.
okay, well, fine, but let's talk about your moral system. So do you believe women should have equal rights to men, or do you think that we should embrace what they have in certain Islamic countries where women are second-class citizens? Because you seem to have
What
a
do you mean
hatred
by
for women.
second-class citizen?
Like, for example, it's difficult for a woman to divorce her husband even if she's being abused, and it's women
No,
are
of course I
forced to
don't
get the
support that. I would treat divorce as a breach of the marriage contract.
Okay, so you don't.
I know that Jews and Muslims have a problem with that. It would be like the aguna thing with Jews. A woman a woman can only apply for a divorce to her husband, and he has the right to withhold it from her. Yes, you are aware of this, and some traditional Muslim society have this. This way of running things, but I'm saying, if one of you has breached a fundamental term of the marriage contract, then you, you're the one at fault, and and divorce should be granted on those grounds. Although the government should always try and help couples who are having marital problems resolve their problems for the sake of the children and the next generation.
Yeah, well, I don't think in Islamic countries divorce is so easy. Now, to my understanding, the rules for divorce for Noahides are different from Jews, right? So the Haganah, to my understanding, and I haven't looked too deep into this, but to the best of my understanding, the idea that a man has to initiate the divorce only applies to a Jewish marriage, but for a non-Jewish marriage, to my understanding, a man or a woman can initiate the divorce for non-Jewish marriage, as I said, because there's a difference in marriage laws, to my understanding, between Jews and Noahides.
Well, if you look online, you'll find that there's some kind of pro forma marriage contract that Muslim couples are supposed to have with each other, and I think that's a good idea, because it just makes it easier to decide who was at fault. What was it, a breach of the term, or wasn't it, or is it in dispute? At least you have some kind of idea. So I think that's a very sensible Islamic thing to do. And then you don't have to worry about prenuptial contracts and that sort of thing. It's like, well, was it a term of the contract or not? Did the spouse breach it or not? And it just tidies up everything. But I imagine there will be a lot of vested interests. Divorce lawyers wanting to string everything out and squeeze every cent from the warring couple. But it can be simplified and should be simplified.
Yeah, Well, the reason I asked about women's rights is because you seem to be saying certain things which consider misogynistic and sexist. Like, I don't know, like, don't also in the Islamic world, don't they have a higher rate of things like cousin marriage and incest, right? So that's also a problematic thing I've heard is true for Islamic culture.
Well, actually, the Bible doesn't forbid first cousin marriage, and traditionally, the European royal families relied on cousin marriage for their partners, for their marriage partners. So, it's not forbidden in either the Bible or the Quran. But probably, unless you're royalty, you probably won't be practicing that much cousin marriage.
I've heard that there's a higher rate of cousin marriage in the Islamic world than other parts of the world.
It's probably to do with trying to keep the family wealth, within the family.
Yeah,
But
well,
I guess other
that's
ways of
problematic.
doing things, you have to, well, not do it too often, or you will, get genetic defects. In fact, you could say that cousin marriage was the cause of the end of the Romanov dynasty in the Russian Revolution. I don't know if you're familiar with the story about the
I,
hemophilia of
I'm not. Could you explain the story to me?
Alexei, the son of the Tsar and Tsarina of Russia, suffered from hemophilia, which he inherited from Queen Victoria. So the Tsar was the first cousin of George V. So yes, there are even pictures you can see of them, looking very similar, wearing similar clothes with their moustache and everything. Um, so it was only a matter of time that these genetic diseases inherited from the female side, um, you know, started affecting their lives. So, have you heard of Rasputin, who was this sort of
I've heard of
Russian mystic
Rasputin.
who
Yes, I've heard of him.
promised to cure um, the sun? But anyway, it scandalized the entire it scandalized Russia, and then the war started going very badly for the Russians indeed, and then I guess the patience of the Russian people snapped, and then in the end, the entire Russian royal family were exterminated by the Red Guards one summer in 1918, and that was the end of the Russian monarchy. So,
Yeah,
I mean, I guess you can use a story to frighten people from, having cousin marriages, but I think it's not really, that much of a problem. I think the problem more, if you want to deal with these social problems, would be, abortion, and aging and shrinking society, not enough children, bad parenting, mental health issues, you know.
I definitely agree with that. But the reason I'm harping on some of these things is because basically I think that one of the reasons there's, to my understanding, lower IQ in the Arab countries is because of the higher rate of inbreeding between things like cousin marriage, and also to my understanding, marriage of underage people is also higher in Islamic countries than in other parts of the world. So there's also that problem.
Well, I mean, the age of consent is only a recent idea anyway, and I'm certainly not proposing to, lower the age of consent. That's not, my thing. But I would have no plans to ban cousin marriage because it's not forbidden in either the Bible or the Quran. But we can use the um, age of consent which is different in different American states. Um, but, so I think that should be enough. I don't
Uh,
know if you know that in the state of Delaware in 1871, the age of consent was only 7.
Yeah, well, I don't believe that the state of Delaware in 1871 is relevant for what we're talking about now, but certainly I don't think that that's okay, and certainly that's not okay nowadays for Muslims to be marrying underage people either. So
Well,
I,
I'm not proposing that.
well, I'm not saying you're proposing that, but if you're defending Islam, then that is a problem you're going to have to deal with, like criticizing your own culture.
It's not my culture. Obviously, it's to do with law enforcement. You know, you have these rules, you need to enforce them. You know, if you make couples whose children are defective in some way, just pay for them out of tax income, I think that would solve the problem, you know, instead of, you know, getting handouts from the state, you know, for disability benefit and that sort of thing. You could easily discourage that sort of thing.
Yeah, okay. Still, I still think that these, I mean,
You
as
still
long
hate
as you're
Islam. That's okay.
as long as you're critical of the bad aspects of Islamic culture,
Well,
then
I'm
it's
just
like,
making a distinction between the rules and the people who don't follow them. And I think, you know, people are always not able to make this category distinction between, you know, a set of rules and the people who don't follow them. And I'm sure, you know, no Jew or Christian or Muslim will say, we Jews, Christians, Muslims are so perfect, we never break the rules.
I wouldn't say any culture is perfect as of now.
Hmm. But also Islam does get a bad press because, well, I mean, Western media is basically, you know, more Christian friendly than it would be, you know, Muslim friendly. But that's a kind of, you know, it's custom and it's tradition, you know, um to hate on Islam, you know, invoke the.
Okay, it's broken up on my end. Yoav, you're muted. Yoav, you're still muted.
So, okay. I want to make a point to you. If somebody says, well,
Christians can't.
if somebody's talking about the Jews, the Jews are this, the Jews are that, the Jews want to rule the world, the Jews are nice, whatever, then you immediately know that that person is anti-Semitic because you know that the Jews will not agree about anything. You cannot speak about the Jews as one. Similarly, somebody speaks to you about America. America wants to rule the world. America is this. America is that. Immediately you know that that person is anti-American. Because do you think that Trump and Biden agree on anything?
No,
So
naturally.
if somebody criticizes, let's say, the position of America in the Ukraine, ask what is the position of the person Trump on the Ukraine? How is the
It's
person?
confused.
How is the person Trump doing? Is he in the right camp of the righteous? Is in the right camp of the sinners? And
He
that's
can't seem to
what
make his mind up.
some people. Yeah, he's a human being. I'm not arguing the point. Maybe he does have a mind on this. Maybe he doesn't. Anyway, don't speak about America. Speak about a party. Speak about a group of people. Speak about certain people.
Yeah,
That's
that was what I was trying to tell Kirk,
yeah.
that we should separate the rules and the people who don't obey them. That was what I was saying. I wasn't saying Jews are all this and never like that. I didn't say that. In fact, I'm saying that, you know, in any group of people, you should identify their belief system, and then you have to judge who how they are in that group, because, you know, obviously, you know, if you obey the rules, you must surely be high status, and if you break the rules, you would be, you know, treated as a criminal within that group. And that was what I was going to continue to say to Kirk. So I wasn't making any kind of a stereotype of anyone.
Okay, because you seem to be indicating that Jews were secretive, which is the anti-Semitic part.
I didn't say that. I
Well,
said, you said Muslims this and Muslims that, and I said that there are that no Jew or Christian or Muslim would say we're so perfect we never break the rules. And then I was going to go on to say that we should make a distinction between their supposed religious principles and the people who break them.
yeah,
So
and that's more.
so I mean, okay, just okay. Let's not even say Jews, Christians, or Muslims. We have a group, and they're supposed to follow certain rules, and the people at the bottom of the heap who are considered criminals because they break all the rules of the group, and they're in prison or about to be executed. So obviously, you would consider these people to be low status, and the high status people are the one who are, law abiding and whatever. That's all I'm trying to say. But people kind of conflate the two. Is
Okay.
is you are putting on a jumper or something, or he's gone away again?
I don't know. I don't know.
Mm.
Off doing his own thing. Yeah, Claire. I just think that your way of viewing things is pretty dogmatic, and that if you were more like Hezi and less like you would be a more approachable person, to be honest.
Okay, but I mean, Hezi he does try to be all things to all men, and then he ends up confusing everyone, and in the end, people just think, oh, you're just trying to be nice, and I'm saying it's important to understand what the system is, and then you'll be able to know who are the goodies and the baddies, right? The goodies are the people who obey the rules, and the baddies are the people in prison or about to be punished for breaking the rules. And within every group, there will be people who are the true believers and the hypocrites who only pretend to obey the rules. And this is the most important distinction that we are to make about any group. I'm certainly not saying, oh, Americans are all bad, because obviously there were Americans who voted for Trump thinking he would end the endless wars. And then suddenly he said, Marjorie Taylor Greene has a different idea of MAGA to me, and I claim the right to say, what MAGA really means. And I say now that MAGA is Make America Great Again with more neocon laws. So, I think in terms of what people are saying to you, you should listen quite carefully to the words they are using, and maybe ask them a few more questions, because, MAGA sounds fun. MAGA sounds good. Everybody's going to agree, if they're American, that they, they would like America to be great.
Yeah, I think it's important to be open-minded and looking for different views, but I also think it's important to not be stupid and not be contrarian for the sake of contrarianism. Um, I think the problem with the way you're looking at things um, is you think that you have the right way of viewing things and everyone else is wrong. When it's like, listen, you can say that from your perspective, Christianity is not logical. However, from the Christian's perspective, Christianity is logical. And so long as you're both worshiping the same God, then for all I'm concerned, you're on the right path. Now, are there practices in Christianity which I'm not necessarily fond of? Yes, but like I said, it's just not considered idolatry from my perspective. And to be
Are you
honest,
Christian or not? I'm a bit confused now.
I'm a Noahide. So
But
do
you
you, are
were
you?
Christian before, weren't you?
I was raised Christian
So what made you decide not to be Christian?
because I don't see evidence that Jesus, or good reason to believe that Jesus was the Messiah or Jesus is God.
Well, I mean, I don't see any point in arguing about who the Messiah is going to be. I mean, we have enough things that happened in the past to argue about. That it's absolutely crazy to argue about who the Messiah might be. When it might not even happen in our lifetimes. But there are certain things that are, pretty much, black and white and open and shut. And I've already explained to you about the opportunity cost. If you make up the rules as you go along, and a lot of the rules are bad for you and your country and your countrymen, then you're going to suffer. Right? I mean, sometimes the sin is its own punishment. It's like you have a map, you refuse to look at it. You have a recipe book, but you think you can just make up, all the ingredients, and your cooking is horrible, and people don't want to come to your dinner parties. But you could just have followed the instructions and got your cooking perfect. So, and it would be a shame. It's like you actually have the book, but you won't look at it, or you won't, understand it properly. And that's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Idolatry is so simple that even a child can understand it. So I guess the reason why people, won't talk about it is because they don't want to admit that they've been wrong, not just for their entire lifetimes, but for generations going back to the 4th century. And then refusing to admit that, but did Christianity prevent the decline and fall of the Roman Empire? It didn't. Did Christianity defend the divine right of kings? No, it didn't, because Christendom entered in 1918. And it's like, and the American Republic and the Founding Fathers, weren't they trying to say something about Christianity when they separated, the church from their republic? And then said that monarchs were tyrants, and basically saying we don't want any Christianity because Christianity is a religion that supports tyrants, and we have to kind of quarantine the church, or there'll be trouble again.
Yeah, well, I agree with my understanding of what Maimonides' position is on Christianity, regarding it being a path to eventually being sort of the missionary arm of Judaism, so to speak. That when the Messiah comes, the world will know of the Hebrew Bible, will know of the Torah, because Christians spread it. So, yeah, and it's not perfect, but I think it's good that they brought the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, the real Bible, out to the nations of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that Christianity shouldn't have happened or anything like that, because obviously it did do some good. It did acquire a global empire. All the global empires have been Christian, and maybe there was a purpose to God, if he exists, allowing the success of Christian imperialism despite not approving of it. And I think that there might, it might actually make it easier for the world to adopt Sharia after they collectively realize, with the help of global media and social media platforms, that Christianity is in fact idolatry, and if they care about their afterlife and whatever, they might wish to rely on rules that are at least widely known.
And let me ask you this: do you consider Eastern thought, like Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism, do you consider them all idolatry as well?
Yeah, because okay, if you accept that idolatry is defined as the worship of anything that isn't God, then everything else must be inferior. But particularly when Hinduism and Buddhism doesn't even claim to come from God. None of the scripture. They don't claim that the scripture comes from God. It's only Jews and Muslims who say that.
So it is idolatry because they're worshiping. Actually, I don't know. Yoav, Yoav, are you still there?
Yeah. Sorry. Yes. I was at.
Yoav, do you know in Judaism they consider Hinduism and Buddhism like Christianity, where it's shituf? Because I actually don't know. or does it depend on the individual Eastern thought?
Well, again, don't ask me questions about Judaism. I'm not a rabbi. But I told you the basic principle. Is it in the scripture? You won't find it in the scripture. So you have to interpret the scripture. One rabbi will say this, another rabbi will say that. And then it's up to a vote.
Okay. And because what I've heard from Hezi regarding this is Hezi does seem to indicate that in his view, I can't speak for him, so I'm not going to say this for certain, but from my understanding of Hezi's position, that Buddhism and Hinduism are more like Shituf because they still believe in a transcendent creator, and that the Hindu and Buddhist pantheons are seen as just joint worship, but they're not seen as equivalent to the
Yeah,
creator.
but I've answered your question. Unless you have any other question, I want to go back to sleep.
Okay, I'm sorry, Yoav.
Well, it's okay. If you have something, then call me again.
Yeah, I just didn't know about that specific point, but yeah, I won't ask you future questions about Judaism unless I'm sure you know about it.
You can ask me about the general principles.
But not the specifics.
Yeah, like throwing people out of buildings. The Bible doesn't mention anything about throwing people off buildings. It doesn't prohibit it either. So I guess you find a rabbi, they say, hey, wait, yes, why not throw them out of buildings? And I'm sure you can immediately find 10 rabbis that will say, no, we should not throw them out of buildings. And that's it. Take a vote and go back to sleep.
Yeah, Claire, I think you should take Yoav's advice and not take this so seriously. Take a vote and go back to sleep, right? If you wanna know what rules we should follow, why don't we consult them?
No, I can't. But just because I know the solution.
What was that?
Well, the consensus is Islamophobic, right? And anti-rules.
I'm talking about the rabbinic consensus, not the.
There is no rabbinic consensus. Do you know what Rabbi David Bar-Hayim? Did you listen to him? He's got his YouTube channel is Machon Shiloh. Have you heard of that one?
I've heard of David Bar-Hayim.
Yeah, well, he's kind of, well, call him aristocratic and sort of scornful and kind of, well, disgusted at the government and everything. But what he does say is that in the matter of advising Jews of which yeshiva to send their children, he's saying, I don't even know anymore. I dare not advise any parents because they're all rubbish. Or you can't even guarantee, what they're going to be teaching because it's all disordered. And it's not just Jews who suffer from it. Muslims complain. And I'm saying, it's as a consequence of living in the West where there are no rules and they keep changing. And that's what's driving everybody crazy. I mean, why not just admit it? It's like, yes, we want rules and we want the rules to stay the same. We don't want it to keep changing, day after day, week after week, until we don't know whether we're coming or going. I mean, what's so unreasonable about that? I mean, if rules stay the same, then you can think, well, I'm going to work hard and do this and get that, and eventually, I will prosper. But how can you stick to anything if the rules don't even stay the same? And why are the rules changing so quickly? I think it's because our ruling classes want to cover their mistakes.
Well, my understanding of the way that Judaism understands rules is that you have rules and then you have interpretations of how to implement those rules, and that the way you deal with the implementation of those rules is you interpret it and then you go by the interpretation that's accepted by the majority of rabbis, aka the consensus, right? And if the consensus of rabbis is something is or isn't idolatry, then that is a criteria we're going to use for idolatry.
Yes, but there's so many different kinds of Jews. I mean, there's a Haredim and the Masortim and the Hilonim and something else. I can't even remember. But anyway, okay, so Jews are already divided into 4 different groups. So of course they're not going to agree on anything because, ultimately the Haredim regard the others as heretics, right? They don't even observe the Sabbath or only observe it when they feel like it. So, and the worst thing is that they don't have a pope. So there's no supreme rabbi saying, you've got it all wrong. My word is the last word, which at least the Catholics have.
Well, it's a good thing there's not a pope, because this way we can prevent an individual's opinion from being seen as the absolute truth.
Well, okay, well, maybe you might just be able to see the point of having a Supreme Court. Imagine if you started a legal action and there's no end to it. You might win this time and then the other person will sue you again, and then you and then you have to sue him back, and then he sues you back again. There will be no end. That's why you have to have a Supreme Court. And that's why you have to have somebody who's supposed to be in charge, so you get accountable political leadership. Otherwise, people will just be passing the buck and say, oh, it's not my fault. It's not the fault of my political party. It was the previous one. They left everything in a mess. And they'll, keep saying this sort of thing and never, ever take responsibility. So you can never blame anybody properly until the whole system collapses. And I'm saying this fundamentally, there's something fundamentally wrong about the system that we have.
Yeah, well, the system we have is also a pretty time-tested system, right? Like, what system are you referring to? You're referring to
250 years, and it's collapsing.
Are you referring to the economic system, or are you referring to the political
No, I'm just saying
system?
250 years of, liberalism.
Kirk,
And
why
what
did
is
Socrates?
liberalism? But just the idea, we like our freedom, we want to be free from rules, and then, but then if you are so free from rules that you commit murder, robbery, and rape, then you're back in the law of the jungle. So you have to have a happy medium. Like you need laws that are fair enough, that people could say, yeah, I see the point of that. We shouldn't murder because we don't want to be murdered. We shouldn't steal because we want to keep hold of our property. Just have laws that are fair enough. And then we think, oh, our ruling classes, they are the best people. They are better than us. They're smarter. Not, who made you the boss? You're stupid. I mean, that's all I'm asking, really. Just give a better show of running the country, and not make everyone think you're mad or malign or morons.
Yeah, Young God asks, why did Fauci get a pardon? Answer that question for me. I don't know why Fauci got a pardon. Maybe Claire can answer that for you, because clearly I know nothing, according to you.
No, actually, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one either. I guess Fauci was pardoned by Trump, right? Was it by Trump?
I don't know. I actually didn't even know Fauci got a pardon.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. But of course, if you're, if you can pardon your friends, I guess you will, your associates. It is just so corrupt, right? And I think it's driving everyone crazy. Maybe the people at the top don't like it either. Maybe they think, every now and then I would like to be able to speak my mind, and not get into trouble. I mean, that would be nice. And if I say something wrong, people should feel free to, undermine my arguments and deny my claims. But there should be, an environment of robust free speech where you don't lose your job for taking a certain position, and people who think you're wrong can tell you you're wrong, and then you can argue about it.
Well, one of my criticisms of the Islamic world is that most Muslim countries don't have free speech.
Well, actually, there's a verse in the Quran that says there is no compulsion in belief. Truth stands clear from error. So they're supposed to support the First Amendment. And I think Thomas Jefferson, who owned a copy of the Quran, must have read it and used it to support the First Amendment, and it sort of makes sense. Like, you can't really make somebody believe in the opposite thing that he claims to believe in just because you say so. Maybe you haven't persuaded him. Maybe he's determined not to be persuaded by truth or logic. But you have to give them the space to be wrong and to express their views, so at least you can challenge them. And then, if enough people care about it, then you kind of know about the consensus of society, or reasonable, right-minded people who take a certain view, or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So my perspective on liberalism is that liberalism is flawed because if it doesn't have a transcendent source. Because if you don't have liberalism with a strong morality, you can't justify the idea that people should be free. But I believe if you ground the idea that people should be free and the idea that we're created with inalienable rights from God, then you'll have a liberalism which is robust and can withstand moral challenges. The problem with the way that liberalism happened in Western culture is that it was a liberalism that was unfortunately not founded on Judeo-Christian principles, at least not enough. And I think if we return to Judeo-Christian roots and we embrace them, then we would have a more robust culture. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, sort of. But I mean, if you think of all these ideologies, which are really religions when you think about it, because people get as upset with you for like a religious person would get angry with you, for blasphemy, if you challenge their what's called their lived experience. So our beliefs, even if they're not properly a religion, can push all the buttons of a real religion, because ultimately all these political and theological arguments are I am right and you are wrong, I am good and you are evil, and I will fight you to the death to prove my point. I mean, these are just the stages where it goes. I mean, obviously we don't want that to happen, so we have to get allow people a certain amount of freedom to express incorrect opinions so that they can be challenged. And on the question of idolatry, I just don't see what the problem is, because I think a lot of it is historic, right? Jews and Muslims kind of are afraid of the consequences of antagonizing Christians who have been known, to go on their crusades, to, conduct their inquisitions and fight religious wars with each other. So understandably, as members of a minority, we don't want to incur their wrath. But, at the end of the day, they'll still blame us. They'll still blame us when things go wrong. They will pick on a minority and blame their problems on it. And of course, Jews are the historic example. But it could be said that because Jews have not so far gathered up the courage to tell Christians what they really think of their religion, and neither have Muslims, to be fair, Christians have been allowed to carry on, their merry way, making up the rules and never deciding whether feminism is Christian, whether gay marriage is Christian, and it's like, well, maybe you just go and find a church that does or doesn't like gay marriage, or will or won't enforce the rule of modest attire in women. There's so many churches, so I'm sure you can find one that you like. It's that sort of idea.
Well, Claire, this is a problem with the Protestant Reformation, is that the Protestant Reformation made it so that way basically people didn't rely on systems of trust when it comes to religious matters, which is the reason that I'm not a big fan of Protestantism. But this is not as true as much for the Roman Catholic Church or the Eastern Orthodox Church.
So are you Catholic? Were you?
I told you I'm a Noahide.
No, but before you said you were brought up Christian, so I was wondering if you were
Orthodox. I was brought up Orthodox.
Right. But I think the Protestant Reformation was inevitable. I know Catholics just sort of really hate on, Henry VIII and Luther and everything, but surely it was inevitable in the sense that, eventually these kings were saying, why do I have to listen to you, Pope? Why? You're just a man. You're just a politician like me. And when they once listened to the Pope, it was because once upon a time in Europe, when all these, European kings were barbarian warlords who couldn't read and couldn't write, and they were just really impressed with Rome and the Roman Catholic Church, who were, and Rome was where their former conquerors came from. They were really impressed. But after a few generations of learning Greek and Latin and their own history, they probably, they must have inevitably come to the conclusion that the Pope is just another politician like them, and they weren't going to be told who they could or couldn't marry by the Vicar of Rome. So that was why it was inevitable. So I really don't think Catholics should hate on Protestants, because it was a historical inevitability. In fact, you must know Leibniz, right? You must have heard of Leibniz.
Yeah, I know who Gottfried Leibniz is.
Yeah, about the best of all possible worlds.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So basically, he's saying a compassionate, benevolent God would create for us, his creatures, the best of all possible worlds. And if that is the case, then everything that ever happened must have been meant to happen. And so we're just left with, okay, Protestant Reformation, it was inevitable. What moral lessons can we extract from that? What moral, historical, psychological, economic lessons can we learn from that? Instead of, crying over spilt milk and forever blaming the Anglicans for, spoiling things for the Catholic Church. When it wasn't just Henry VIII, it was also Luther. I'm familiar with the arguments that Catholics use against these Protestants. But anyway, we are where we are. People have kind of used a brand of Christianity to support their ideology, and this is basically what has happened. And then then Calvin came along and said, "Oh, usury, it's okay if it's not over 5%, right?" And the Swiss bankers just loved it. I mean, Calvin was actually French, but he must have seen his opportunities in Geneva. So off he went, and the Europeans were very happy with being able to practice usury. And I think the fact that we're now over our heads in debt in Europe is because of this behavioral addiction of shaking the money tree that usury provides for us.
Claire, empirically speaking, has there ever been an economy which hasn't had usury which is successful?
Well, we don't know about successful. I mean, boom bust cycle, is that successful? Apparently it was the Chinese who discovered paper money, and obviously they went crazy and printed much more than they should have, and then the economies collapsed. But it is a behavioral addiction. When you're feeling poor, we'll just create money out of nothing, and get somebody to pay for it in future generations. I mean, this is basically what has happened.
Yeah. So, but that doesn't really answer my question if there's ever been an economically successful country which has banned usury. Because all the countries that I know that have banned usury are economically, I hate to use this word, but shitholes. I mean, I'm not gonna say I hate to use this word. Just to be frank, the standard of living in countries which have banned usury seems to be low in countries that have usury. So doesn't that indicate that there's at least a correlation, if not a causal relationship, between banning usury and negative economic effects?
Not not necessarily, because you can see somebody living high on the hog, right? Oh, they're going on a holiday, and and then you discover they're a drug dealer, and then they're in jail, or murdered in some gangland fight, right? So just because somebody is having a good time doesn't mean that they will forever have a good time, or that there won't be some, day of reckoning. So I think I think ultimately, all we can say is these are the rules. It will probably protect us if we try to follow them and made a point of following them, rather than think, oh, we broke a few, we got away with it so far, we're doing well in our robbery and piracy, and and we're having fun. But I don't think it lasts forever, because we also know that all empires decline, and they always decline, um, for I would say, lowering standards of sexual morality, fighting wars that they don't win.
Yeah, Claire, I think when it comes to usury specifically, I just haven't seen macroeconomic evidence that banning usury would be economically beneficial. And the main
Well, the
reason,
Jews ban it. The Jews know it's bad for them. They're not
yeah,
supposed to
but
practice usury on each other.
that's on each other, but they're allowed to practice it to non-Jews.
Yeah, yeah. So,
And
but
non-Jews are allowed to.
Gentiles would know that it causes a boom bust cycle. It actually encourages war, because war finance is basically usury. And
Well, the boom bust cycle, I believe, is caused by. I mean, I haven't looked too much into macroeconomics, but my understanding is that when you have artificially low interest rates because of the Federal Reserve System, you have a boom, which is then followed by a bust because you have reckless investment because of the artificially low interest rates by the central banking system. And when you have artificially low interest rates from the central banking system, that leads to reckless spending, which leads to an economic collapse. That's the reason for
what
the
is
boom bust
Yoav
cycle.
doing? Is he?
But yeah, you broken up on my end, Claire. Oh, you're muted.
Uh,
What were you saying, Claire? You broke up.
is Yoav asleep?
I think so. Leave him alone. Leave him alone.
Because
But
I think he sort of go under the sheets or something, and I think he's just staying awake to let us carry on, which is nice of him. Uh,
to get to your point, do you not think that if we got rid of a artificially low interest rates from the Federal Reserve, that we wouldn't have this boom bust cycle because there wouldn't be reckless spending, followed by an economic collapse as a result of the reckless spending?
Look, I don't really know, but I mean, I think we would have a more stable economy. It wouldn't just sort of go, it wouldn't have these surges and, highs and lows and everything. And people would just be more careful and not be, borrowing and lending irresponsibly. And things would settle down, and, people would suffer less from these, depressions and booms and stuff. So, well, we can try. We've never tried it, so I don't see why not. And I suppose when the economy finally collapses, people will be more prepared to try this new thing, like, of following the rules.
Yeah, I just don't think that would be economically successful from the evidence that I've seen. But okay, if you wanna go move to a country which has banned usury, you're free to do it. I just don't think you should try and impose that rule, which doesn't seem to work on other countries until you have empirical evidence that it works.
Well, I think all countries practice usury, and
No,
it's not really a
no, not
question.
all. Not all countries are practice usury. Don't they ban usury in Islamic countries?
Well, I'm I'm not planning to move into, any country. And the point is not where I live, but whether the banning of usury would be a good thing. I know it's a sacred cow of the West, because they'll be saying, without usury, we wouldn't have our wonderful economy. But that's because it's still, working. Um, at the moment, even though inflation is very high and nobody's really happy. But we'll see. I mean, the mood could easily change, and people might, turn against usury and a lot of other things. But we don't know until, I guess, the shit hits a fan.
Yeah, I'm just saying that if you actually want to embody your values, you're more than welcome to move to a country which has banned usury, and you can see
It
the
wouldn't
economic
change
benefits.
anything because any country that is banned usury is probably a Gulf kingdom.
Okay.
But I'll look it up. How many countries that have banned usury? It's actually quite hard to ban. So it'd be like Afghanistan, I suppose.
Yeah, and look how prosperous Afghanistan is.
Yeah, but it's a victim of Western imperialism, invaded by the Russians and the British and the Americans. So,
And let's say
well,
we do.
apparently in Iran, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia, but the very corrupt countries, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, I've heard rather better things about Iran. But, ultimately, what I'm proposing is introducing Sharia to a Western country. It's not about where I want to live. It's about wanting to try my idea out, and I know that you will probably never read the Quran, because you have a certain view of Muslims in their shithole countries, right? So you probably won't be reading the Quran or wanting to have a more impartial view of it.
I might read the Quran eventually, but that doesn't mean I'll agree with it. I can read something and not necessarily agree with the context. I mean, I'm open to reading a lot of things that I don't agree with.
Oh, that's good.
But yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else to say? Because I'm getting kind of tired, to be honest.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Okay, and so is Yoav tired. So thank you, Yoav, for staying up just for us. It must be midnight where you are. Thank you, Yoav. And
Thank you, Yoav. So you wanna get this wrapped up, Claire?
yeah, I'm leaving. What did you?
Okay.
Sorry, what was the question?
I was just asking if you wanted to wrap this up.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Because I think Yoav wants to go to bed. I think it's about 12 where he is now, right? After 12, and he probably has a long day tomorrow. So thank you, Yoav. And
Thank you, Yoav. Okay.
bye, everyone.
Bye.